Hello folks, Grace here, and thank you for joining me today. This next project is one of my unfinished pieces. For a bit of history, I started this at least 6 years ago, although I would probably ballpark it as being closer to 8. My original intention was to give it to my mother as a table runner to use for Thanksgiving. Although I flatter myself in thinking that with this pattern and color, they could be used at any time of year. I mean, it's green and leaves. I think you'd be hard-pressed to find a time of year where that's not appropriate. I had chosen a relatively low-cost 3-ply cotton that I think is really intended to use for macrame. It's a thick boy. I have a vague but persistent memory of thinking that I made this choice so that it would help insulate hot dishes from the table. I'm doubtful of that logic now, but I guess we could always test that hypothesis later, and if it burns, I'll just flip it over. It'll be fine. Most of my unfinished projects were put down because I just had other stuff going on in my life, like other projects or deadlines. At first, I assumed that that was the case for this project, but then I took all of about 2 seconds to look at it, and it came flooding back. I put this one down out of pure frustration. After having done a whole bunch of work, I moved into different lighting and found that there was a huge color difference between the yarns I had been using. Now, I know this yarn had all been purchased from a big box store and that it had all been purchased at the same time. Apparently, at that time, I had forgotten to check the lot number. In fact, looking at the different yarns, I don't think any of it was from the same lot. For those who may be unfamiliar, a lot or a dye lot is a number or code that's given to a batch of yarn that's made at the same time. What this means is that they're using the same dye batches and the same fibers. This lot number is included on your yarn's labels so that when you're buying it, you can make sure they're from the same match so that they're color true. This prevents your projects from looking wonky and like you started using a different color in the middle. You know, like exactly this situation. After some soul searching and some discussions with my much more logical counterpart, John, I decided to leave the offensive area, which was roughly 1/3 of what had been done to that point, and just roll on with the project in hopes that when more of it was done, it would be less noticeable. This decision was partially based on the thought that very few people would notice, and more importantly based on the thought that if I took it out, I might have to then purchase more yarn in order to complete the project. And that's like literally the opposite of what I'm trying to do here. The pattern was one that I had found online, and it's entirely made up of chain stitches and double crochets. It's pretty dense for an open work pattern. I think part of that decision was based on my giant trivet concept, and the other part was based in my skill level at the time that I started it. The first time I worked on this, I remember it being exhausting. I found it very difficult to track which row I was on, and also I kept having to pull a bunch of it out because it just wouldn't line up correctly. But in finishing it, I found it was really simple. It's actually really rewarding to think about how much improvement I've made in this time, and you know, it makes me think about how much improvement I have to make still. I did make one pretty big mistake. When I started working on the project, I had to figure out which hook I had been using. So I made some sample stitches with the yarn I had with different sized hooks. I thought from that assessment that I had been using a 5mm hook. I thought wrong, because again, I didn't take any notes. Why would I do something that useful? I found out later that it must have been a 4mm hook, or possibly a 4.5mm hook, which is definitely something I remember owning but can't find for the life of me. I had brought this project to work with me because I had to do an overnight shift, and I did about 5 hours of work on it, and then I held it up and found that the whole thing was getting wider and looser as I had gone. It's not so drastic, and it's only really noticeable if you're looking very closely at it or if you have it folded in half. So I decided to continue on with the 5mm hook because I felt that it would be much more noticeable if it widened and then decreased again. Another problem I have with the finished product is that I didn't pull the off-color bit. While the choice I made, I stand by, it turns out I had some yarn left over at the end, so it would have been fine. However, at this point, in order to remove it, I would have to take apart all of the work I just did on it, which is not something I'm willing to do right now. Overall, I like it. It's not something that present me probably would have chosen to make, but considering my skill level at the time, I think it was a great choice. I also think that it was a great learning experience. It is a very attractive table runner and will hopefully grace the table for many meal-based holidays to come. Now, we only have to test its ability to hold hot dishes. Alright, so I pretty much took it directly off the flame and put it right onto the table runner. I can still feel where it's warm right here. You can see I didn't know how to weave my ends many years ago, but it seems to have worked. There's no mark of it. It seems to have held its own pretty well. And considering that most of the dishes that would go on it would be out of the oven for a few minutes at least, I think that this might actually work. Good job, Past Grace. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I've had a lot of fun with this one. It feels great to complete one of my unfinished projects and just in time to actually give it to my mother for Thanksgiving. If you have enjoyed this video, please like, comment, subscribe. I try to post on Fridays, but if you want to make sure not to miss anything, remember to ring the notification bell. I've been Grace. You've been great. Remember to be excellent to each other. Have a great day.